This is Judith Silverman Hodara. I'm a founder and director at Fortuna Admissions. We're really excited to have with us today Cassandra Pittman. Cassandra comes to us with an incredible background with a Columbia MBA, as well as having worked as the associate director at INSEAD and also as an admissions officer at London Business School. So glad to have you with us today, Cassandra. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the big question for students at this time of year is certainly, should I think about an international MBA? And what are some of the differences between a US MBA and an international MBA? And I was hoping that maybe together we could sort of talk through a couple of the reasons that you might choose one or the other.
Yeah, I think there are two main reasons to specifically look at a top-tier international MBA. One is if you want an international career. I went to Columbia. It's a very international program. The vast majority of recruiters on campus were still recruiting for U.S. positions, even if they were international companies. And I had an international career afterwards, and you can still make it happen, but it's definitely a little bit easier if you're on an international campus. I think that's number one. And number two can be the time of the program. So a lot of the international MBAs are shorter or have shorter options than 2 years, and for some people that's a better fit. And so I would say those are two of the main reasons to consider an international MBA.
And when you were looking and reviewing applications for both INSEAD and London Business School, were the U.S. candidates sort of an unusual group for you? Was that like a difference, I guess? And they were sort of more like, oh, there's someone here from Minnesota. Was that considered like diversity for you guys?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, INSEAD especially, there's no nationality that makes up more than 10%, so, or at least there wasn't in my day. I'd have to go back and look at the exact stats today, but so everybody was kind of minority. I think the challenge for Americans, especially applying for international programs or for INSEAD or LBS, is international motivation is something that is very important to those schools. So they want to see a history of people having taken opportunities that they've had to get international exposure and experience, to learn different languages. You have to speak 2 languages to go to INSEAD, not LBS, but INSEAD. And so that's difficult. And I'm American and lived abroad, and my French is horrible. So it's a little difficult for us to get our head around that.
I was also thinking a little bit if you could talk, because you went to a 2-year program and you've worked for both 1-year programs and 2-year programs. So can you maybe give our viewers a sense of why would you go for a 1-year over a 2-year and what some of those differences are?
Absolutely. And just as a point of a little correction, I actually did the accelerated program at Columbia Business School. So my program was 15 months. Yeah, so it was a little bit in between.
Thanks for the clarification.
I saved a little bit of time. So the key thing that business schools look at is if you want to make a career change. So oftentimes, for example, at Columbia, I know if you don't have the internship because you were doing the accelerated program, they just want to make sure you're really going to be able to get that job. And they would really encourage you to look at the 2-year program with the internship if you want to make the career change. Now, personally, I made a complete 180 change in my career without the internship. So I know that it's possible to do it without, but I will also say that I didn't have the benefit of experimenting with what I wanted to do. For me, the reason that an accelerated program was a better choice, a better fit, is just because I was a little bit older. I was 29, turning 30 when I was going into the program, and it seemed, 2 years at that stage of my life, putting my career on hold for that long, seemed just a little bit too long for me. And I think the other thing to consider is the financial aspect. The lost salary for an additional year to the 6 months can be a differential for people. So those are the two criteria that I looked at. I would say if you are a little bit less certain about what you want to do, maybe you're a little bit younger and have a bit more time to give yourself, I think it is really a gift to give yourself. So once it's probably your last degree, it's an amazing experience. So not necessarily worth rushing if you don't have solid reasons to rush it.
Did you feel as an accelerated student and then also seeing students in the 1 year, what is the sense of community like? I mean, I'm sure it's very tight-knit because it's very intensive. Can you talk more about that, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Columbia, we had, in some ways, it's hard to compare to what other people had, but I think in some ways we had a closer class than did the September term, simply because there were fewer of us.
Mm-hmm,
We were starting off cycle, and so we actually got to know, we had only 3 sections as opposed to the 8 or whatever there are in the normal one. So I think we were pretty close-knit. And at INSEAD, it's very, very intensive. You're taking 80% of what is in a 2-year program and putting it into 10 months.
Right.
And so I think it's sort of trial by fire, and people feel connected in that way. On the other hand, you don't have that second year to form different relationships. And if I think back, I've got 1 or 2 really, really close friends that I only met in my last 6 months that maybe I wouldn't have met if I had a 1-year program. So.
Curious from your perspective, having gone to school in the U.S. and then having counseled students internationally, how do you think the changes in the H-1B visas are going to affect applications? Do you think that more Americans will be looking to leave the country? And do you think that more international students will be looking to stay out of the country because of these slight shifts in government policy?
Gosh, it's such a good question, and I'm not sure that I have an unbiased enough opinion about what's going on to give a perspective. What I will say is I've kept a property in the United States, and I Airbnb it whilst I work here in London, and I can tell you that tourism is down about 30% in New York, and really? I felt the financial hit personally on my real estate investment. So it wouldn't surprise me if people do start to look for more international opportunities, and if companies do the same. But we have similar questions here, at least in the UK, following the Brexit vote. So.
Right. I should have, I guess, sitting here in Pennsylvania, I guess the H-1B is primary in my mind, but certainly, what's going on with Brexit as well.
Well, and I think the U.S. is by far the biggest target for people who are pursuing MBAs. That most of them, the vast majority of MBAs are in the United States, and so I think the U.S. will feel the biggest impact. But on the other hand, companies need talent, and I find that they find a way to get what they need. So.
Sure.
Yeah, I know that's not a very satisfying answer.
No, I love talking to people about this, because from where we sit as advisors, it's a really interesting discussion. What does it mean to students that are coming in that may or may not be able to get that run up to apply for the MBA? How does it affect the eventual MBA applications themselves? And then do people want to stay here for school if they might not be able to stay here for work? So it's a question that I'm mulling around a lot. I know, just from colleagues in the field, how it's starting to affect some of their applicant pools. And so it's something that I'm really glad I had the chance to talk with you today about.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Cassandra, for your insights this morning. And we look forward to tuning in again soon with another Fortuna discussion. Thank you so much.